Focus on a long list of tasks awaits the Prime Minister after he takes the oath of office. What should be his top priorities? We have some ideas, everyone has, and we've been looking at the newspapers. Here are ours. Let's first talk about foreign policy. He started the neighbourhood first policy. India needs more of it, more specifically Pakistan and China, the two recalcitrant neighbours of India. Yesterday's result welcomed by both Islamabad and Beijing. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan tweeted, and I'm quoting, "I congratulate Prime Minister Modi on the electoral victory of the BJP and allies. Look forward to working with him for peace, progress and prosperity in South Asia." The Chinese went one step further. Chinese President Xi Jinping wrote a letter to Prime Minister Modi conveying his congratulations, and here's an excerpt from that. "I attach great importance to the development of China-India relations and would like to work with you to guide the development directions of the bilateral relations, enhance mutual political trust and expand pragmatic cooperation and promote the closer developmental partnership between the two countries to a new height." Pragmatic cooperation, he says. But if we conduct a realistic assessment, India will continue to face challenges from both China and Pakistan. The new BJP government will have to find ways to counter China's growing influence. Tensions with Pakistan escalated at the beginning of this year. It'll be interesting to see if both sides make some conciliatory gestures from here on. As for the domestic issues, the first priority should be jobs. Critics of the Prime Minister say that he did not do enough on that front. They say the Indian economy is witnessing jobless growth. The government claims that more jobs were created, but the data is not available. The truth most probably lies somewhere in between. So this time, just creating jobs will not be enough. The world is grappling with new challenges. Artificial intelligence is now part of the mainstream. The challenge this time will be to create jobs that are future-proof, that are future-ready. India's economy also needs a boost. Yet again, expectations are high from the Prime Minister. The business sector is raising demands for deregulation. India's public sector banks are facing a liquidity crisis, but the Prime Minister's immediate challenge will be to boost economic growth. In the December quarter, India's economic growth fell to its slowest pace in 5 quarters. It stood at 6.6%. National security was at the top of the agenda in this election. As part of the manifesto, the BJP promised to strengthen the country's defences. It'll be interesting to see what steps this government takes in the next 5 years to do that. Besides these, the government needs to put more focus on the Smart Cities program. Infrastructure growth in India rose under Modi. More roads were built, the connectivity improved, but there's still much work to be done. In the first 4 years of its tenure, the Modi government built 73% more highways than the last 4 years of UPA 2. The government identified several smart cities. It is a project that the Prime Minister is quite bullish about, but the progress report on these smart cities can look better. India is urbanizing at an unprecedented pace. In the future, the Tier 2 cities will be as important for sustainable growth as the Tier 1 cities. Creation of smart cities will have a cascading effect on the generation of jobs. The land acquisition bill is another area where the government needs to focus on. And then there is climate change, increasingly viewed as climate emergency. There are good reasons for it. It's the single biggest issue because neglecting it will have disastrous impact on the future of humankind, especially for a country like India. So lots to do there. Let's start with foreign policy, Pakistan and China, and the message from the Chinese president makes for interesting reading.
I think this is probably a bigger issue for this government than what's happening on its other flank, where I suspect there may be some incremental improvement, but not very much. So there is clearly an opportunity for India and China to get together much better. India remains a little bit standoffish because it's worried about China's influence, it's worried about Belt and Road, it's worried about the depth of the relationship emerging between China and Pakistan. It's also worried about the route of the economic corridor, which goes through territory which India claims as its own because it was part of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. But China, I think, is in a situation where it really wants to buddy up with India because China's feeling a cold wind from the States. So there's a big opportunity there, which I think Narendra Modi would be interested in pursuing.
Well, we spoke about the Wuhan spirit. One thing about Narendra Modi's foreign policy that we've discussed on this channel a lot, from non-aligned movement of Nehru's time to what they call strategic autonomy. So on the one hand, you're joining hands with Japan to counter China and Sri Lanka with that container project. On the other, you're also engaging with the Chinese at the SCO.
And that's only a couple of weeks now they're going to meet. And so it's going to be important as to what comes out of that, because there are two countries that are going to be a focus of Indian concern. China, of course, is one. Pakistan is the other. And I think the Prime Minister is in a rather good position. He goes with a strong electoral mandate here. He's got the leaders of the two countries have said they want to improve the relationship with India. And there are a number of ways that this can happen. Even during the wars of Doklam 2 years ago, Indian ministers were visiting in Beijing who were dealing with economic issues. It's interesting if you read the comment of the Chinese foreign policy spokesperson, because I think it was very accurate. It said, we have had problems, but on the other hand, we have an enormous economic potential. I think that's the way the Indians look at it too. We have enormous economic potential with China, but we have to be alert to the problems that the Chinese might pose. And the Chinese, it's been my experience, respect strength. And what Prime Minister Modi did at Doklam, he asserted strength. India was not going to be nibbled away, by Chinese or anyone else. And I think the Chinese respected that. And it got into Chinese press. Read the Global Times, which is sort of the party newspaper.
Yes.
And and it reflects Chinese views of India and Modi. The last few months, it's been high praise of Modi, partly for reasons you mentioned, the geostrategic issue. But the Chinese economy is sinking as well. Yes. The Chinese need a place to invest and to sort of do business, and India has a huge potential. In fact, something I think that people often overlook when they talk about Indian problems, it's this country which is recognizes and is in the process of tackling the issue of infrastructure.
Right.
Huge infrastructure needs here. If you had money to invest in infrastructure stocks and bonds, India is the place to do it, because this is where the growth is going to happen. And you have a Prime Minister who's brick and mortar. Let's build. Let's do something. And now that he's likely to have...
When the Chinese come to build, they bring their own people and they bring their own money, and the locals never get jobs. You look at Pakistan,
not entirely.
You look anywhere.
Not entirely. Anil Ambani built much of his energy structure by an $8 billion loan from Shanghai Electric. $8 billion. That gave him the funds that almost nobody else had. So they have potentially a lot of money. India needs capital. They need it badly. The FDI, I just saw statistics, the FDI, which India had been the largest recipient 2 years ago at 60-some-odd billion, is only half of that now.
The question is, should that money and help be coming from the Chinese? I think the fact that the Indian government stood its ground despite threats, despite repeated invitations for the BRI, is a story in itself, and that rankles with the Chinese.
I think the BRI should not be touched.
It shouldn't be touched.
By any respectable country. No. Malaysia has gone out of it.
I agree with you.
Sri Lanka has suffered
Pakistan.
from it.
It's a death trap.
If China has surplus steel and it wants to dump on other people, they can do that with the Central Asians. I think it was important. Don't just think of China and Pakistan in isolation. It's China, Pakistan, US, Iran. India has to steer a very careful course between these two things, because the US-China tariff war, India has an interest in that. The US-Iran battle, India has a very clear interest in that. And my own private view is that people should stop obsessing about Pakistan. Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh and Modi, they were eager to do something about Pakistan. Except for fighting terrorism, leave Pakistan alone, neglect them for a while, and then let them come to India. India should not go to Pakistan.
I think if you strike a good deal with China, it'll take care of Pakistan.
I'm a hard man.
I think that this is a great opportunity to improve relations with China without giving away much on the ground. A lot of it is only optics as well as messaging, I feel, because we know the areas where we have problems with China, including the border, including certain strategic things, and we know our economic interests. I completely agree that the one, Belt and Road is a disaster, possibly even for China. It indicates imperial overreach, and that is how these... But now to come back to, your original question about the economy, I think 2019 is so different from 2014 because 2014 there was an empty coffer. The UPA had spent everything. In fact, they had overextended themselves. this is a very sound fiscal situation that India is in, though I agree that the economy is not doing as well as it was maybe last year. But I think we are much better off, than before.
It's still the fastest growing economy in the world.
Exactly.
We may think it's slowing down.
And I want to say one thing. Can I finish my point? My real point is this, that jobless growth has become a catchphrase. But can you have workless growth? It's not possible. So let's not keep talking about jobs, jobs, jobs. We have to create opportunities for work and reskill the population.
I think that's very important because
livelihood.
Demographic potential
And
has
see,
not
we have to
been
prepare
exploited.
them out of the permanency model. Everybody wants a permanent
But they came up with a skill
job.
development ministry. What happened?
No,
the
that
Indian
unfortunately
youth is not skilled.
Yeah.
They do not have the right skills to be employed.
That was unfortunate because the minister had a much more important ministry, petroleum. So that took a back seat. I think we have to get back to that. That's why educational reforms are important. Our higher education is in a mess. I've been in this sector all my life, and I can tell you, apart from the IITs and a few IIMs, we are sitting on a colossal competence deficit. And that is because we are so afraid of excellence. We have created a system of complicated entitlements.
And a lot of people who graduate from there, I mean, we wrote about this in school, but I think that brain drain is still happening. They go to the Silicon Valley to build companies.
No, because
there's another question
we were
there.
more interested in extending opportunity for higher education than improving the quality of higher education.
Totally.
I don't think the issue
and
is
the
higher
complex set of
education. That's too
entitlements
much
that nobody can unravel.
Right.
What India needs is vocational education. That is we had an ambassador, Nancy Powell, 2 terms back, who had come from the state of Ohio, which has an excellent
We need
record
everything.
in vocational
Vocational
education. And she had proposed it, and a lot of people agreed with her, that one of the major weaknesses of Indian education, it's not training young people to do practical things. They all want to be white-collar workers, hence going to graduate schools and that. And that's a mistake. I'm told that, for example, probably the best school in India on vocational education is the Victoria Institute in Mumbai. They never have a problem in getting their graduates very good jobs because there's an enormous demand in this country for skilled workers. Not so much for people like this, but skilled workers who wear blue-collar stuff, they have a demand for, and that they need to have, but there's a cultural problem. Cultural problem is that many Indian parents think that it's degrading to send their children to a place where they're training how to use, machinery and that. Yeah. But that's where the demand is. Yeah. That's where the country lacks. And that's one of the reasons I think you don't have development in the countryside. You have too few people, who are trained to work these kinds of industries. So you need a mass expansion of vocational education in the countryside.
Okay, I'm running out of time, so I want to, if I had to ask you for 3 things, that should be the top priority. Just 1, 2, 3. That's all I can, I think, get within the next 2 minutes. Starting with you, maybe.
3 things. I think a focus on jobs, I think is absolutely essential because, I think tens of millions of educated underemployed voted for Narendra Modi because they believe he's more likely to get them jobs and careers than anybody else, but they need to see action on that. I think a sort of a healing touch in terms of the type of rhetoric that's coming out. And I think rural distress clearly was one of the issues bubbling under during this campaign. It didn't quite get the salience that it might have got, largely because Congress wasn't able to keep the messaging on that issue. But there clearly needs to be a focus on how to make sure that farmers are getting better prices for their crops.
Right. 3 quick points.
Good governance, inclusive development, and improving farm incomes.
Farm incomes. Lord Desai.
I think, first of all, cleaning up the banking system so that the cost of credit goes down. The government has gone halfway to sorting out non-profitable assets, and more needs to be done. They have to consolidate the PSU banks and sell them and improve the banking structure because the cost of capital is very high in India. That will speed up growth. That will solve the growth problem. But secondly, I think the education thing is very important. There has been initiative on skills, but you need more initiative on skill-based education. And lastly, health.
Health.
I think the Ayushman Bharat thing has started. You have to complete that health revolution, especially the public health revolution, because that touches everybody's life. And if we could do the public health revolution, that'd be fantastic.
Walter Anderson.
Investment money is needed, and so they have to sort of devise ways to get money. And there's a lot of money lying in India where they somehow have to sort of attract it out and into productive investment. That's one. The other thing is environment. This country faces an environmental disaster unless it begins to take certain steps. And that's, I didn't hear much of anything in the campaign, but there's got to be a focus on that. And there are things the government can do. And the other thing is jobs, which has a linkage, as you mentioned, to the whole issue of education. You need a more practical education in this country. The educational system in this country does not suit the needs of this country.
Right. Hope the government's taking note, the new government. Thank you all, and we are completely out of time here, but thank you. It was very nice to have all of you on this show. Thanks for watching.